Station 51, engine 27, engine 32, truck 105.
You're listening to The Fire Break with Steve Wolf. Welcome to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing innovative technology for wildfire control. Check us out on the web at teamwildfire.com. So a guy who's no stranger to fire is Bradon Fletcher, and he's the fire chief in Southwest Tennessee. Now, I thought the only thing in Southwest Tennessee was Memphis, but apparently, there's other stuff around there too. It's not just the gateway to Mississippi for gambling. It's also a place where people live, right? Bradon, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve. Yeah, I'm about an hour north of Memphis. So there's a little bit more in West Tennessee than Memphis.
Yes, there is. I lived in Memphis for 8 years. Oh my goodness. Too long.
I understand. I try to stay out of Memphis. I do. It's great barbecue, though. Great barbecue.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. That's, one of the constructive uses of fire.
Yes, sir.
It is. So what kind of fires are you getting in Tennessee? Is it the same as it's been, the length of your career, or is it getting better? Is it getting worse?
I think that, so on the structure fire side, I think it's probably fewer now than what we saw when I joined. I joined the fire service in 2000. So this is my 25th year. I felt like we went to a few more house fires in those.
Wait a minute, Bradon. Where did 25 years go?
Tell me about it, right? I have no idea. It seems like maybe not yesterday, but it doesn't seem like it's been 25 years for sure.
It sure doesn't. Wow. So you're seeing less structure fires.
Yeah, probably less structure fires. I mean, still go to a few every year, and we've have a robust automatic aid system on that. So Tipton County, where I'm from, is overall a pretty rural county. There's populated municipalities kind of along the main thoroughfare through the center of the county, which is U.S. Highway 51. But as you branch out east and west of that, it gets more and more rural, a lot of farmland, some forests, things like that. I'm on the western side next to the Mississippi River for just kind of easy reference. We were talking about wildfires, and it's kind of humorous to me because here I am on a podcast called The Fire Break that probably has an audience that's used to seeing wildfires that are hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of acres. We simply don't see that in West Tennessee. But one thing that's interesting is we are starting to see bigger wildfires, particularly when we get into a drought season and everything. But what's interesting here is, I guess, the climate. You've lived in Memphis, so you understand the humidity that we deal with out here. And so one of the things that works in our advantage is, like, even on a bad drought or even severe drought situation, our humidity level and fuel moisture, is still higher. On what's a bad day for us, would probably be considered still a good day out west. But what I've noticed with that is, we're getting a few more fires, particularly like in cropland, that's spreading a lot faster. We're getting fires that are getting into wooded areas where maybe we can't access it with a brush truck. Maybe it's a little more complicated on foot because, just frankly, most of our departments out this way, they're not trained, really to work as hand crews. We don't have hot shots. A lot of the guys, I laugh and joke sometimes. It's like they're tethered to a brush truck. If the brush truck can't get to it, or the brush truck runs out of water, they kind of like, what do we do? I will say that my guys, and this is predated my time as chief, have been pretty talented with getting out with flappers or McLeod tools, rakes, Indian cans, that type of stuff. We just recently started training our guys to operate with progressive hose lays into places that we can't get to with brush trucks. And I'll be honest with you, that is a completely foreign concept to this area. To have hose packs and to be extended in line with a hose clamp. And it's been a little bit of an adjustment. And we've gotten some looks from a couple of departments like, what are y'all doing? It's like, just trust us. We're going to extend this line back here. It's going to be much better than going out here with rakes and everything. But again,
Yeah.
like we're seeing drier conditions, and it used to not be a big deal. Hey, if the fire got past the edge of a field, got into a wood line or something, it's like, it's leaf litter. It's usually still pretty moist. It's not going to spread very far. The trees are not going to catch on fire, that type of stuff, to where now, like, it's getting into some of those areas and it's moving quick, and it's just kind of changing the game for us.
Yeah, and you get the right wind.
Absolutely. Wind-driven fires suck regardless of what's on fire, but you get a wind-driven fire, in a wildland situation, as I'm sure a lot of the audience is aware, it just exacerbates the situation. Fire will move and travel, faster than you can get on it, or even sometimes get ahead of it. And that's it's a new thing for us to deal with.
Yeah, in some cases faster than you can drive.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen 100-mile-an-hour plus fire
Absolutely.
front movement. It's
Absolutely.
gets
We had
insane.
one, it was last year. It was automatic aid fire, and it started out as a crop fire, and that's how a lot of fires start out. Because during the harvest season, you're running combines through a field. A combine, the best, if you're not familiar with a combine harvester, the inner workings of it is, it's a lot like a helicopter. It's like 1,000 parts moving in opposite directions, right? So there's a lot of pulleys, a lot of belts, a lot of chains, a lot of bearings, right? And so it's not uncommon for a bearing to go down, something to get hot, throws a spark, sets, whether it's wheat stubble or soybean stubble or corn stubble, on fire. And then depending on what the moisture conditions are and the wind conditions, that can be a really simple operation, or it can really take off. And so we responded to one in a mutual aid area that really took off. And it was a new thing for everybody involved, because they were used to, like, a field fire, pretty simple, right? If I can drive a tractor or a combine through it, I can drive a brush truck through it, right? And so they would do the old drive and spray, the mobile attack, and they're spraying and they're hitting the edges, and what would, in a normal situation, if you still had an ember or something behind, would smother itself out, and the fire is flaring right back up just as fast as they're going by, and we had to, like, tell them, like, guys, we got to slow down. We got to soak everything, and they're just not used to that. They're used to just being able to just drive by with that brush truck and just spray, and everything's good, and maybe come mop up a few little hot spots at the end. And reality was, it was kicking right back up because the wind was 20, 30 miles an hour sustained, with gusts to 40 to 50, and we're just not used to fighting fire, fighting a brush fire, wildfire in that type of situation. It's just not a
Yeah. I was going to ask you, but you brought it up about mutual aid, and I was wondering, mutual aid brings you more guys, but it doesn't bring you any more expertise, because you're just bringing in more guys who have as little experience as your department in that area.
Absolutely. We're all pretty much on a level playing field when it comes to wildfire, and that's, if we can't get it with a brush truck, we got to get creative.
So what's the next level up of assistance available?
Well, I don't know that we in West Tennessee have ever hit that moment. Normally, there's enough departments with brush trucks and enough departments with people, that we've always been able to accomplish it. I told you before we started recording, I think it was 2018 or 19. There was it was over 600 acres, and it started in a field. It was a field fire. It was wind driven, windy day. And that's like a once in a career wildfire for guys out here. A 600 to 700 acre field fire that was wind driven. Yeah, absolutely. For now,
Right.
As of 2018,
Right.
that was a once in a career fire for the guys that were on that. And we've had some that have gotten close to that, but not quite to that extent yet. But I do think it's something that we'll start to see more of. And like I say, we are seeing more instances of what would be simple wildfire, simple grass fires on the side of the road, or a controlled burn that got out of control, because people always pick the best days to burn their leaves and burn their grass, and out here in the South still burn their trash, which is not legal, but they've been doing it forever, right? And
Right.
people still do it, and then it gets out of control, and then next thing you know, you're out there for hours. Fortunately not days for us yet, but you're out there for a long time, dealing with what ultimately, in most cases, was a bad decision. The farm stuff, that the accidents happen. You don't know when a piece of machinery is going to fail. Hay bale, hay baler fires, I should
Hey,
say.
Baylor. Yeah.
Hay baler fires. Those are always interesting as well because you can tell like they happen often enough, but they don't happen to the degree where guys don't get tunnel vision on the hay bales. And I've seen that time and time again. And they get tunnel vision. They got this big hay bale burning, and they go over there with their brush truck and they'll dump the whole brush truck on this hay bale. Meanwhile, the hay field is still spreading. And it's like this hay bale is lost. They're not going to feed this to cows or horses. Like the moment it caught on fire, it's done. Let's just ignore this. We'll come back to it at the end, right? Like let's go stop the spread, through the field before we get target fixated on the hay baler or the hay bale.
The moth to flame
But,
syndrome.
we've had a few of those as well. So.
Interesting. Yeah. So it looks like a lot of departments get stuck in this idea of look back planning, right? They look back at how things have been for the last 30 years and say, okay, well, let's just make a plan for what we've seen because that's what happens around here, right?
Absolutely.
And then,
absolutely.
and then they get right. And then if conditions change, which they seem to be doing more and more rapidly, they're kind of caught with their pants down there.
And it's funny you say that because I deal with that a lot, whether it be hazmat or it be tech rescue, or just changing how we do things with structure fire and wildfire response. And it gets frustrating sometimes because you'll get ridiculed. Oh, why are you worried about that? We've never had that happen. We've never had to worry about that. Blah, blah,
That's
blah,
why
blah,
I'm
blah.
worried.
And so, yeah, it's like, and you sit there and you stay plugged in to what's going on in other places, and you see things, the city of New York and the state of New Jersey having to worry about wildfire response, and then on the eastern side of Tennessee, they're dealing with it a little bit more. They've got the mountains and everything. They go to wildfires out there. They have red card trained people and actually know how to fight wildland fires. But yeah, absolutely. You got to be kind of looking forward and planning for the future and looking at what could happen, and you got to be reasonable with that too. You can get so far off in the weeds that you start planning for stuff that, you end up neglecting your core mission as well. And so it is a balance, but you got to be looking ahead. And it's like, just because an event never has happened in your jurisdiction doesn't mean that it's not going to. And that you got to have a plan, right? Because, who are you going to call? They called 911. You responded. Okay, maybe you've got automatic and mutual aid that you can reach out to, but like what you got to have some sort of plan to deal with whatever that hazard may be. We like to throw the term around all hazard response, and maybe you can't be an expert in every single possibility, but you need to have a plan of what you're going to do in this situation. Who are you going to call to manage that situation?
Ghostbusters, right?
Absolutely. That was my favorite movie growing up as a kid. I could recite the lines like word for word. I love the Ghostbusters.
We'll test you on that in a little bit. I know you've got a lot of specialty though in hazmat, and you just recently participated
I'm
in
a hazmat nerd.
Yep.
Yeah, and you kind of got to be a nerd, I guess, to love hazmat. And it's funny out here where I'm at. Like we're a small department, we're in a rural environment. We don't run a bunch of hazmat, every single day. And the hazmat that we do run is actually the most common hazmat incidents. It's fuel, right? It's hydrocarbons from either vehicle wrecks or incidents at a gas station or things of that nature. We do like not in my first due. We do have trains and U.S. highways running through the county. We do have a county hazmat response plan and everything with that. But again, it's one of those that we don't have a lot of hazmat incidents, so hazmat's not at the forefront of of everybody's, planning and thought process. And so, what I've tried to do within my department is to make sure that we're squared away, able to deal with the things that we see most often in our jurisdiction, which is going to be hydrocarbons. Everybody's got a gas station, right? So there's a 406 coming, DOT 406, either bobtail or tractor trailer delivering fuel to that gas station, wherever you live, or it has to come through your area to get to the gas station, right? So,
Right.
Propane. Okay, so you need to be prepared to deal with propane. Everybody has to deal with propane. You've got propane moving through your area. We're rural out here, so some people are on natural gas, but there's still propane tanks that provide heat, to houses and stuff like that. And then having a strong agriculture presence. Sometimes we have to deal with some pesticides, spills or something like that. A lot of times it's a jug falls off a farmer's trailer, and
Right.
it's like in the middle of the road, and people see it, they don't know what it is. They call it, it's, most of the time it's not. But like I say, we're not doing anything crazy. We're not going into any massive facilities or anything like that. Although we do have some of those within the county that we could be called as mutual aid to deal with as well.
I don't know if you've looked it up. I believe it was in the 90s, but it was one of the largest propane disasters, and it took place in Memphis.
Yes, sir.
When,
yes, it did.
Right,
that was,
giant tanker coming across the bridge from Arkansas took that first exit a little too fast, wrapped that tanker around some embankments.
Absolutely.
And set a whole neighborhood, dozens of cars on fire, killed a lot of people.
One of the things I try to drive home, like when I'm teaching firefighters, you can't remember everything about everything that you might deal with, but there's a few things that you need to remember. Okay. And that is propane sinks and natural gas rises.
Yeah.
Because the number of odor of gas calls that you're going to go to, and for most agencies, that's not considered a hazmat run unless you find something, significant there. But knowing where, if you've got a 4-gas meter or something, and you're going to look for something, knowing where to look, knowing how to use your meter, knowing that, it's not just hold it, at chest level here, I need to meter high, I need to meter low, and what am I looking for? Am I looking for propane? Am I looking for natural gas? And then of course, I'm a big, you get me going on hazmat. I'm a big nerd on the chemical and physical properties, and
on the what?
Chemical and physical properties,
yeah.
of different materials. Right? You got to understand chemical and physical properties. That's the baseline for everything in hazmat, is understanding chemical and physical properties. Right? So propane being heavier than air. Right? So understand, its vapor density. Its vapor density is it's heavier than air. Natural gas is lighter than air. So understanding simple things like that drives a lot of your decision. Is a product flammable or not? Is it corrosive or not? So what I illustrate, teaching, whether it's HMO for basic firefighters, hazmat ops, or even to the technician level, your understanding of chemical and physical properties is going to drive every decision that you make. It's going to drive your PPE selection. Okay. It's going to drive your tactics. Okay. It's going to drive your decon selection. Okay. So like every decision, there's a reason. So I teach hazmat in Anniston, Alabama, at the Center for Domestic Preparedness. And so there's a reason why the chemical and physical properties lecture comes first. Now it sucks because you get that lecture on Monday morning, early, and people have flown in, drove in, whatever, right? So the most important lecture that you're going to get is, it's like the second thing that you get when you get there, right? But it literally sets the foundation for everything else that you do in hazmat response. Is I've got to know, is this a solid, liquid, or gas? Okay, is it flammable, corrosive, toxic, radioactive, all of those different things. Does it have a vapor pressure? If it's a liquid, does it have a vapor pressure? If it's in a vapor state, is it heavier than air or lighter than air? And what does it react with? What do we need to keep it away from? Is it an acid or a base? Right. So all of these decisions that you make are based on this initial information of what you can gather from the product. And that's if you know what the product is. And then if you don't know
Right.
what the product is, then like you got to start figuring out some chemical and physical properties in order to, figure out how you're going to mitigate that particular situation. So it gets
Right.
pretty involved.
Right. If the placard can't be read at the point when you get there,
Absolutely.
the shape of the tank, is it going to be a clue whether it's pressurized or not, whether it's liquid
Yes,
or gas?
all of
Right.
those
Yeah.
clues, and we try to tell
Yep.
them like chemical and physical properties is like clue school. Okay. This is
Yeah.
like investigated. This is like, the police investigations for hazmat. It's the chemical
Right.
physical property. Because even if I can't identify at 100% what it is, right? If I can identify some of its chemical and physical properties, I can still deal with it, and so, then it's easy when, I can see the placard. Okay. And,
Right.
and I can look it up. I can look it up by UN number. It tells me exactly what it is. I can, use an SDS sheet. I can use the ERG, a NIOSH pocket guide. Now you got the ERDSS software program. Um, you know, a lot of folks don't want to talk. We call it GTS hazmat, right? Google that stuff, right? I can Google that chemical. I can probably find an SDS sheet. I may not want to make my decisions off Wikipedia, right? But if I got a
Right.
name of a chemical, I can probably Google that and come up with an SDS sheet from a manufacturer that I can consider reliable. I can maybe, because we slow down in hazmat, right? If this is something crazy, like, I don't know, like I got a hydrogen tube trailer on fire, okay? Well, I know of several places that have dealt with that incident. There's a lot of information online that I can find that, like, okay, I've never had this happen before. What do I do? Like, do I try to put it out? Do I spray water on it? Where do I spray the water? Right. And again, you can pull this information up at your fingertips and be like, okay, yeah, I want to keep the cylinders cool, but I want to make sure I don't apply water anywhere near the relief valves, right? Because I want the relief valves to continue to operate as designed, And so anyway, you can learn lessons of stuff, right? You can come up with contact numbers for companies, I mean, Chemtrek's always your friend. But I mean, like, you can literally find out a ton of information at your fingertips these days if you just slow down, think it through, and come up with a solution that's going to keep everybody safe.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that one example, but I imagine if you have a leak in a pressurized gas tank rather than a complete rupture,
Mm-hmm.
right, you're going to see the temperature of that tank dropping.
Yep,
Right, just like when you see it with your barbecue propane tanks and the condensation around it. And then if
absolutely.
that right, and if that temperature drops low enough, you spray water on it, you're going to build up ice, and then you're going to defeat the pressure over relief valve.
One of those physical
Right, all
properties,
these
right?
things. Yeah, right.
When we compress a gas, we generate heat. When we release that gas under pressure, right, it cools off. So,
Yep.
understanding that and being able to use those visual indicators as a clue.
And I think right when you get a liquid turning into a gas, it'll have a cooling effect. I think regardless of whether it's under pressure or not. Is that right?
That is true. So if you look at evaporation, right?
Yeah,
And
evaporative cooling.
so so this is kind of a funny story, a little bit off, kind of changing gears a little bit, but when evaporation made sense to me. Okay, so
Okay.
my granddad had a collection out in his barn. We called it the museum. Lots of old antique stuff, and I could remember as a kid, and he had this canvas water bag. Okay, that would hang on the outside of a vehicle. So when you were taking long trips, you would fill this canvas water bag up. You would hang it on the outside of the vehicle. All right. The water would soak through the canvas and, would evaporate and would create this cooling effect. So you had cool water to drink whenever you stopped and, to take a break or whatever. And it was like,
Yeah.
at the time, it's like, okay, that's cool, Granddad. Like different, right? Because, now we have air conditioning and, you just stop at a gas station, get a cold drink, right?
Right.
So then I'm in the Army, right? And I'm in basic training. We still drank from the Lister bags. Okay. And so like every day, water truck came out and filled the filled the lister bags, put the water purification stuff and everything off in it, right? So when we were out in the field training, you drank your canteen water, you went over to the lister bag, pushed the little button, filled your canteen back up. And it didn't quite click then. I thought that water was always cool because it seemed like the lister bags were always hung in the shade, right? So then I'm in Iraq in 2003, okay, and I'm with a heavy equipment transport company, and it's hot, right? We're in the desert. We're in these big trucks. The Het was designed to haul like the M1 tanks and the Bradleys and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, you got this big doghouse in the middle of the truck that, sits above like the transmission. And then of course the motor's big Detroit motor out in front of you, right? And all of that stuff's like 200 and something degrees. And you're in this cab and you're in a desert. And, we didn't have ice, to keep the water. We had plenty of water. There was no shortage of water. We had cases and cases and cases of bottled water, right? But you're drinking this 100-degree water, okay? And you know that you got to drink it. So I was a medic every day. I was starting multiple IVs on soldiers at the end of the day that had gotten dehydrated because they weren't drinking enough water. So you're drinking this water, and it just, you had to force yourself to drink it because it's so warm. And then this one day I had an idea, and we're cruising down MSR Tampa. And then those that have been overseas, they know what I'm talking about. So we're cruising north on MSR Tampa, and I'm just so tired of drinking this hot water. And so I reach back, I find my rucksack, and I pull out a pair of socks, okay? And so I take a water bottle, and I shove a water bottle down in the sock. And then I take another water bottle, and I soak down this sock, right? I take some 550 cord, I tie a loop around the top of the sock, and I stick it outside the window, and I hang it from the mirror frame, okay? And every so often, I'd pour just a little bit more water down that sock as we were going down. And because I was sitting there, I don't know why it clicked. It just hit me. I'm thinking about Granddad and his lister bag on the old car, going down on these road trips and everything. And sure enough, after letting that sit for a good while going down the road, just constantly adding water, I pull it back in, I take it out of the sock, and that water was actually cool. It wasn't cold, but it was way cooler than what it was. And so anyway, the principles of evaporation, absolutely same thing. The reason alcohol feels so cold on your skin, you pour a little rubbing alcohol on your skin. Well, that has a pretty high vapor pressure, so it's evaporating quick, and it creates that cooling effect. Same concept. Same thing with gasoline. If you get gas on your hands, that's the same thing. So
yeah, don't get gas on your hands.
Not supposed to.
Diesel is diesel. Yeah, I could live with. Right. I mean, I've put out matches in a bucket of diesel. I'm sure you've done
absolutely.
that too, right?
And again, understanding those chemical and physical properties, right? Diesel fuel is combustible, gasoline's flammable, and it all has to do with that, that ignition temperature. And so, understanding that I can handle those two different, right? I got diesel fuel out on the ground from a spill, unless we're just on scorching asphalt, I'm not too worried about that. That's, I mean, right. I'm not going to take it lightly, right? It's not water,
sure.
But I'm not as concerned, with that as if I've got a large amount of gasoline out on the ground. So, and of course it's a double-edged sword too. If I got gasoline out on the ground, yeah, there's that ignition hazard, right? But it's also going to, depending on how much gasoline, it's going to evaporate, right? Which is going to reduce that hazard as well. So, I mean, we've literally dealt with gasoline spills, at a gas station, of using a positive pressure fan because it was over a covered area. So I didn't have the direct sunlight. It wasn't really endangering anything. Let's take a positive pressure fan, okay? Come in already from the upwind side, so I'm not worried about any ignition being created by the positive pressure fan, and just blow air across it, okay? And there's nothing else in this particular area. Again, it's situation dependent. I don't want to blow the fumes into the gas station itself, right?
Right.
But if I'm not going to blow those fumes near any type of ignition source, and we mitigated that. We evaporated off. I mean, there's a few gallons of gasoline. It's not a big deal. I think somebody just broke a hose off. The gasoline goes away. We move on about our day. And now we don't have a bunch of absorbent pads or kitty litter or something else to have to dispose of now.
But you put your canteen in the gas first so that you could cool the water,
Well,
right? Have you ever been involved in the use of diesel to smother a cotton bale fire?
no, sir. No, I have not actually. So we have a cotton gin. It sits right on the edge of our fire district. We treat it as kind of our first due. Um, we're automatic aid to it if there's an incident to it. But it's interesting. They've got a very unique process there in that facility. Their fire and flame detection equipment inside of that cotton gin is like next level type stuff. And so the moment that system detects a spark, okay, it stops the inflow of cotton, okay, and they process everything that's in the system and they bale it up. And those bales all go out into a designated area. They don't know if they're on fire or not, okay?
Right.
And basically they leave them out there for a couple of days. If they are on fire inside, there'll be a pile of ashes in the morning. Sometimes you'll never see any smoke. You'll never see any flame. It'll just disintegrate into ashes. But it's really interesting. But now that you've said that, and I've sat here and thought about it, I've not heard of diesel, but I've heard of kerosene being used back in the old days. And I want to say that the guy that owned the gin might have been the one that told me that story. I've never personally witnessed it. But now that you say that, I got a little faint recollection of Mr. Kelly, who runs that gin, maybe telling me a story about back in the old days, doing something along those lines.
Yeah, because those hay bales are enormous. I mean, they're the size of the bed of a large truck in some cases, right? And you don't want to lose all that cotton.
Absolutely.
So as you said, once an ember starts in there, it can just slowly and subtly work its way through, and ruin the whole thing. And what they would do is they would soak the whole bale down with diesel or kerosene, and that would make an occlusive seal that would keep any oxygen from getting in there, and then the ember would just die.
I definitely see that working. Can definitely see that working. For sure.
I don't know what the cotton smells like after, but
yeah, I'm going to say they're probably not going to use that cotton for anything.
I don't know what they make burlap sacks out of it or something. That's great.
Oh.
So you have a pretty good demeanor there. You look like you get a good night's sleep. Are there things that keep you up? Yeah, I don't, but I don't know. 4.5 hours, my brain is just like, get up, you got stuff to do.
Yeah,
but what keeps you up at night?
Do I?
You
now?
did. I was just wondering.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Used to be able to what?
I used to be able to survive on 4.5 hours of sleep, but as I have gotten older, I really need that 8 hours. I can get by with 6 or 7, but I really need that 8 hours. With the military days, the 4 hours of sleep, wake up, good to go. But yeah, as you get older, I've found a lot more value in that full 8 hours of sleep.
Better decision making.
Like, who needs 8 hours of sleep?
Right. Are there things that keep you up though, or metaphorically, if not literally?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess as a fire chief, you're always wondering, have you prepared enough? Have you done everything that you can do to ensure that your department is ready to respond safely, to protect the public, as well as to make sure that they can respond safely and not get jammed up themselves. That's probably the stuff that I maybe worry about the most is have I done enough to prepare my members? Have I done enough to ensure that we are all prepared, myself included, to respond to whatever the situation may be that we're called to. That's probably the biggest things right there. That I don't want to be caught completely unprepared for something. I try not to let it like give me ulcers or anything, but
right.
That's your biggest worry is have you done everything that you're supposed to do? And honestly, I feel like as a fire chief, that should be your biggest worry. Like if you don't have that worry, because I mean, who is truly prepared for anything and everything? Okay. So like, I feel like that should always be a worry. Like that should always be in the back of your mind. That should always be driving your decision making, your education. Like not from a negative standpoint, like again where you
Yeah.
worry yourself to death, but like in making sure that not only are you staying on the forefront of technology and issues that are coming up in the fire service, um, but that you're also conveying, mentoring your members, developing succession planning within your organization, and just overall making sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to do in ensuring preparation of the organization. Prior proper planning prevents poor performance, right?
That's what they
And
say.
like we're in a business where most of what we go to is predictable, right? And so Gordon Graham's famous for saying, if it's predictable, it's preventable, right? Maybe the incident's not always preventable on our end, right? Because the human factor is why we have a job, right? Not everybody's going to do the right thing or the smart thing, right? It's job security for us. But as far as like types of events that could occur, like we've got a pretty good idea of what those are. Okay, we should have a pretty good idea of what we go to a lot. Okay, what maybe is an occasional incident. That whole high risk, high frequency, high risk, low frequency, low risk, high frequency, all that, the little categories that everything falls into, right? And we should be planning appropriately. And I mean that you could dive off, we could spend an hour just talking about planning, everything from your organization's training program, which I think is probably one of the most important things within your organization. To just like making sure that you got the right equipment and everybody knows how to use it, and you got the right people and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I could see how the thing that you'd be most worried about would be, uh, a training failure that led to something happening to one of your team,
Absolutely.
right? If you lose structures, whatever, they're insured. And if people do something stupid and their house goes up and they go with it, that's sad, but that's not a personal tragedy for you. It's a personal tragedy is when something happens to your team. And if you feel that there would have been something that you could have trained them to do that would have prevented that.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't want to get anybody hurt or killed. I mean, what we do is risky. Okay, there is an element of risk to what we do. It's on the warning labels of all your PPE. Okay, firefighting is inherently dangerous. If you want to
Right.
eliminate the risk, don't respond. Okay.
Right.
There's the risk in the response itself. There's the risk once you get to the scene. Obviously, there's a risk to going into a burning building, right? So you mitigate that risk, okay, by ensuring that your people are properly trained, okay, ensuring that they're properly equipped, all right, and then trusting them to do the job that you trained them and equipped them to do. Okay. You may have to provide a little bit of oversight. There's times you got to pull the reins back a little bit, right? But at the end of the day, I look at it right like this right here. Because we've made aggressive a bad word in the fire service. Okay. And I always think of it like this right here. If I'm trapped inside of a burning building or my family's trapped inside of a burning building, okay, I want the guys and gals that are getting off of that fire truck to be the most aggressive animals, okay, that you can find to put on a fire truck, okay?
Yep.
And you would much rather, I feel like most, like I feel this way, I can't speak for other people. I would much rather have people, firefighters, that I have to pull back on the leash, okay, because they want to go a little too hard, they want to go a little too far, okay, than to have someone that I got to kind of kick in the tail to motivate to go in and do, what should be basic stuff like conduct a search and put the fire out.
Yeah.
So there's a delicate balance there. And I think a lot of times because of training failures or a lack of training, we see and I'm talking about structural firefighting because
Yeah.
wildland firefighting is a different animal. Hazmat response is a different animal, right? Technical rescue even is a different animal. But in structural firefighting, right? We need motivated, aggressive, intelligently aggressive, not blindly aggressive, not just, you know, just going to charge wildly into anything, right? But people that
Right.
can assess and be like, ah, you know what, that roof's looking a little sketchy. We probably ought not be under it or on it, right? But otherwise, guys and gals that are going to push in, they're going to make the search, they're going to make the attack, right? And they're going to do it in an aggressive, efficient, and yes, safe, relatively speaking, right?
Right.
Manner.
Relatively safe.
And
Right.
so when we get into folks that and believe me, I'm not like the world's gift to firefighting or hazmat or anything for that matter, right? I have a passion for what we do, and so when folks don't train aggressively, okay, and they don't also get the experience out in the field, and you can't control the experience that you get, okay. Not everybody works for an agency that they're going to go to a fire every day or every set, right? Um, so your level of real world experience is going to vary depending on where you work. And so if you're in a place kind of like us, we're not going to a house fire every day or every week. We might go to two or three within a couple of week period and then not have one for months. And so, and then being out in the rural setting, the number of fires, structure fires again, that you go to that were defensive fires when 911 was called because you live out in the country. Okay. And so it wasn't discovered until it went through the roof. And then you've got a lengthy response time. So what I tell folks is you need to be training and preparing for that one opportunity that may be only once in a career. Okay. You might, out in a volunteer fire department, out in the rural setting, you might only have one situation ever come up in, say, a 20-year career where you actually push inside and have the opportunity to rescue a victim from a fire. Okay. Might happen once in a 20-year career. Are you going to be ready? Are you prepared for when that night comes or that day comes? Or are you just sitting on the, well, we've never had to do it. We've never, we saved the slab, like all the things that you
Right.
hear, right? Because the reality is you live out in the country. There's not a fire station, every 2 to 3 minutes away. We cover
Right.
42 square miles, okay, out of a single station. We cover 42 square miles out of a single station with an all volunteer staff. Okay. We have surrounding agencies that are coming into us, all right, that may be 15, 20 minutes away. All right. Yeah, they're coming at the same time. But I mean, you're still looking at, 10, 15, sometimes 20-minute response times, depending on where you're going. Right. And so not every house fire you go to is going to be the same as like if you're in a big city where, 2 minutes, 3 minutes from 911, you've got 5 companies and 20 people, showing up and they're tripping over each other, right? Not everybody has that, right? So are you going to be prepared when that opportunity comes? Or are you going to be like holding your head inside because you're like, you could have done more, but everybody's patting you on the back, right? Because you're a firefighter, so that automatically makes you a hero, And then my favorite, right? So you're out in the country, small volunteer fire department. Well, they did the best they could. They're just volunteers. Like, I hate that. That drives me absolutely insane. Like, we've got it on the wall here at the station, and I live it and I breathe it. Like, being a volunteer is no excuse for mediocrity. Okay. We don't run a social club here. Okay. Now we have fun. We have a good time. We cut up, a firehouse is a firehouse, right? Same circus, different clowns. Doesn't matter where you go. All right. Everybody's going to bust chops and like cut up and have a good time. But at the same time, like we train and we're serious about training, train a lot, and we send people like to outside training. We bring in outside training, right? Because again, tonight could be the night. Okay, that's probably hanging on a few fire station walls, across the country, and you just don't know when that's going to be. I mean, the tones could drop right now. They could drop tonight. It could be next week. It might be 5 years from now when that opportunity occurs. And if you're not planning for that, if you're not preparing for that, then you're going to look like idiots. Somebody could die, and you're going to have to live with that. And you can, soft soap it or try to polish it however you want, right? But you got to live with that, and so, yeah, those are the things that keep me up at night. So,
That's a lot. That's a lot.
no
Wow.
wonder I
Well,
get any
I
sleep.
can't. Yeah, right. And you're hydrating. The Lord knows what that is that you're
Well,
hydrating with. But
it's Gatorade Zero. So I typically drink one Gatorade Zero in the afternoon every day, and then to offset my energy drink in the morning, and then I drink a lot of water. So it's it's June, it's the South. You've lived in Memphis, so you know what it's like out here. There is nothing worse than getting hit with a wildfire, structure fire in the middle of June, July, August here in West Tennessee, to make you rethink hydration. So,
absolutely. Wow.
I mean, we made a
Brandon,
medical call 2 days ago. I think it was 90, 91, 92. It was like one of the first days that we cracked 90, here with the start of the summer. And it was just like, oh my gosh, just oppressive heat, right? And it's so funny because, by the end of the summer, by the end of August, like we're going to be used to it, and you get a 70-degree day and you're putting a jacket on, because you're cold. But when that first summer heat starts to hit, man, it just, it takes a week or two to adjust to it.
It really does. Well, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. It was absolutely
Hey, I
fascinating.
appreciate you having me there. It's funny how you like networking, like just you like where it leads to. You saw the book there, the Building the Hazmat Team.
Yeah.
You reached out to me, and now here we are. And the whole me being in that book is a perfect story of networking. Because I don't feel like I belong in that book, but the guys whose book it is felt like I did. So that was very humbling. But again, and that was a story of networking. Right? So,
right. So many people around. You just got to make the time to reach out.
Absolutely. And I tell guys,
not all of them. I mean,
there's some idiots.
I guess, right. I mean, the trick is knowing, or having a sense about who to reach out to.
Absolutely.
Who's going to be a mutually beneficial thing and who's going to be a lunatic.
Absolutely. And there's plenty out
there. Well, actually, I mean, I'm going to put myself in. No,
I'm passionate. I'm passionate.
I was the lunatic in this one. Great. Well, thanks so much for sharing your passion about hazmat and your, the obvious concern you have for your department and the seriousness with which you regard volunteers, because all there to do the same job.
Yes, sir.
Paid or not. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your service as well.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet. Look forward to chatting with you again on this. And if it turns out that you do get a wildfire in that area, the kind that you didn't expect, I certainly want to learn what your experience was with that.
Absolutely. We'll definitely share that.
This is Chief Bradon Fletcher from the Gilt Edge Fire Department in Southwest Tennessee. I'm Steve Wolf. You've been watching The Fire Break. We're sponsored by Team Wildfire. Check us out on the web at teamwildfire.com. Until I see you again, be safe, be careful, and safety second, mission first.